Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to start off our first keynote session. It's an absolute privilege. He was on the panel yesterday with our dignitaries and our special guests. He's born and brought up in Mumbai in India. Jimmy Madon moved to the United Kingdom 5 years ago, where he procured a first-class honours degree in computer science from the University of East London. He's currently employed as a software systems development engineer at Genius Software Limited, a Warwickshire-based company that specialises in the field of lean engineering and consultancy. He's also pursuing his Masters in Software Engineering from the University of Oxford. Jimmy is an ordained priest, a Namar Maktab, which qualifies him to carry out higher liturgical ceremonies for the Zoroastrian community all around the world. He has been actively performing jashans, naljots, weddings, and of course funeral ceremonies for the community for the last decade. As the youth coordinator of the World Zoroastrian Organization and the social secretary for the Young Zoroastrians of the UK, which is the youth wing of the Zoroastrian Trust Funds of Europe, the ZTFE. He actively helps in organizing community events and also volunteers to teach at Young Flames, religious educational class in London for kids and parents. Understanding how to distinguish the religion from culture, race, ethnicity, and while knowing the gist of our simple daily prayers, one can put Zarathustra's time-tested ethical framework to good use. He is the man. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a proud moment for myself and the delegation to hear this man over here talk today. Please give a loud round of applause for Jimmy Madon.
It is the year 500 BC. Persia is under the glorious rule of the Achaemenid king Darius the Great. It is the first day of training for young Jamshid, son of Kushna, the mighty warrior. At the tender age of 6, he is very years. The first is to ride a horse. Next, you must learn to roll a bow. Lastly, he must, for all the days of his life, learn to speak.
That might stay on YouTube forever to one day. So, just to mention, all the characters depicted in that movie were purely fictitious. We had reindeer for the seasonal effect. Couldn't find a hobby horse. And my father's name is Krishna, and I think he is a mighty warrior. But anyways, to those giving me really curious faces right now, I can explain this. So I was born and brought up in Mumbai and grew up in a Parsi colony and went to a Parsi school which was primarily run and managed by Parsis. So every Wednesday we would all the Parsis in our class, a very large number, all 5 of us would end up meeting in the canteen for some bread and sack and rather debatable prawn curry rice. Eventually, we did have religious classes running every Wednesday at the ungodly hour of 8 a.m. in the morning, just before the classes actually started. So, there was one famous topic, which was my favorite topic, which the teacher was actually describing, and it was in Persian history. They went on to say this quote from Herodotus. Now, I was quite fascinated as a 12-year-old boy sitting in the class thinking, what exactly is the relationship between the art of war and the Zoroastrian teaching of speaking the truth? That's when I realized that the religion was a practical way of life. At the height of its power, the Persian Empire spanned a massive 8,000 square kilometers, and it was famous surrounding the continents of Asia, Africa, and Europe. It was the largest medieval empire in the world, and I'm not quite sure how many of us know this, but Zoroastrianism was the de facto religion of the state. So that's when I realized that our religion is not merely a set of cultural beliefs and practices which I was surrounded by in my Parsi style upbringing. So very good morning to all of you. Today I hope I could have a similar impact to some of you here today, and I assure you that this will not be a long lecture on Zoroastrianism, because I'm very sure that we would all rather be doing whale watching or glacier walking on the South Island instead. I just want to share a few tidbits today about the faith which are much lesser talked about. Things that our previous generation did not quite tell us about so that we could choose the religion for ourselves. Because if your religion does not help you in your life, you will probably not choose it, and you will probably end up just following it for the sake of following it. That's what Zain Dalal said in his lovely talk earlier this year at the LA Congress. He said, if you choose it, you will keep it. But not only will you keep it, you will spread it and give it to your younger generation so that it will benefit them. So imagine a canvas and everyone over here has a rough idea of their religion on it. Today all I'm going to do is add a few more dots to that canvas. Now each of your pictures of religion will be quite different to your neighbors. And that's what religion ought to be. It should be something personal and something that makes sense to you. So the best way to begin adding more dots to that canvas is by asking yourself a very simple question. A question that was asked to me by a great friend at work who was not merely an atheist, but who believed that religious identity was the sole reason for all the misery and conflict in the world today. Can anyone guess the question? Well, he was an atheist, so what would be the first question? Does God exist? Or why do you follow religion in the first place? So to answer that, I look back on my life. How many decisions that I took in my life were directly or indirectly influenced by the practice of my religion? And I didn't quite recall too many instances of that. And that's when I realized that I do really need to learn more about why I do what I do. Otherwise, what's the sense? So if life were to be like a forest with too many rough paths, poisonous snakes and ditches, then I summarized that in a way, my religion is something that guides me navigate through that forest easily. Now, saying that, it won't make the forest magically disappear into a beautiful paradise or garden. But you know, religion is something more like those deep inspirational quotes that we see on Facebook or Instagram with these beautiful landscape backgrounds. And you know, some of those quotes where you're like, this is so deep that I could really see Adele rolling in it. So that's what I summarize religion to be very briefly. And my friend was happy with that. But on a serious note, I spoke to quite a few atheists in my life. And they pretty much believe in a religion as well. Like most of humanity, with a good moral upbringing, they too have a way of life. And I use the word religion to explain that way of life. And my atheist friend was still happy with that use of the word. Now, of course, different people will have different meanings of the word religion. But according to most scholars, the word religion, what does it mean? It can be broken down into two parts. Re and lego or ligare. Re as in again. So you do something again and again. What do? You consider something carefully. You choose it. You bind with it and you reconnect. What exactly do you choose? Your way of life. What exactly do you bind to? Your way of life. It's something that you follow again and again, day in and day out. You know, that's why when I was in India, people very famously said, religion, cricket is my religion, and Sachin is my God. So, my friend was again happy with the use of the word religion with this. That's fine. What was the next question he asked me? Bang on. Why Zoroastrianism? So, having this conversation with my friend, who absolutely didn't believe in any supernatural powers or any metaphysical purposes of religion, I found amazing that I could still explain the philosophy of Zarathustra in a very practical way to him, and he could actually use it as a way of life or a guide in his life too. All I had to do was to translate every single entity, every single complex personification like Ahura Mazda or God, etc., into what it stands for. Now the problem today is we don't know exactly, because we don't know the languages we pray in, we don't exactly know the meanings of these words. So we personify them. Like for example, take the example of Ahura Mazda. What does Ahura Mazda mean? Ahura means mighty or supreme, and Mazda, wisdom. So it's infinite or supreme wisdom. And Zarathustra says that it is Ahura Mazda who is my highest teacher in explaining me how should I live my life and in the best possible way. Now for a second, if you actually think about it, that's a universal truth. It's a fact. Wisdom is what guides you in doing the right thing. And my friend was very happy about it, my atheist friend. And so what happened throughout the ages was we tried to personify a few more bits. We said, mighty or supreme might translate to a lord over all. And that's fine. Humans have a tendency to make everything into a physical entity because that's what we can interact with, that's what we can perceive. So if you see in both those pictures, the figure on the right is Ahura Mazda giving a ring of dominion to the king who was being invested. So that's an historical evidence of how Ahura Mazda became personified. But that's fine because we need to believe in something that is higher than me, something that makes the universe work. But it's all practical because Zarathustra called him infinite wisdom, the Lord of wisdom. We just constantly sit for hour-long Jashan ceremonies just to enjoy this Mahidam. Why do we do this? We constantly ask ourselves, why did mom dad tell me that my Sutra and Pushti are my protectors or my physical armor? Now as a kid I thought, yeah, that's the metallic armor I kind of wore over there that will protect me. Growing up, I realized, hold on, what does a Sudre mean? Sud as in right, Ra meaning path. Once again, all we did was to symbolically translate an abstract concept, the abstract concept being the right path. Now all of a sudden, when I wear the Sudre out of the shower coming into my room, and I'm really angry on this work colleague of mine, but all of a sudden I realize I need to be on the right path today. And I might just calm down on my anger a bit. Maybe, I'm not saying always, but maybe, if I ended up driving a little bit more peacefully and I took the right decision by peace of mind and ended up not ending up with an accident, with a terrible accident, that's it. My Sudra and Christi were my physical armor. And that's the thing. So once you start understanding every single thing, why you do what you do, it starts to all make sense. Why did you do your Sudra Kushti? Or so why did you do your Sudra Kushi ceremony, as the Iranians call it? Or your Navjot ceremony? Was it just so that you could have 1,000 embarrassing pics of yourself on stage that you still laugh till today? Or was it the fact that I remember when I was on stage, people were like, Mitra, muttati ban. Yeah, as in son, pray louder. But I don't even know what I'm praying. How do you expect me to be very confident up on stage and actually recite the prayers loudly? So that's man's physical urge to bring everything into a physical form. So let me actually start by asking how many of us here actually know what the Kemna Mazda mean? Because when you pray this prayer again and again, with meaning, it all of a sudden just changes. The Kemna Mazda is nothing but a question. Who or Mazda? Shall grant me protection from anyone who looks at me with an intention of doing harm. Now, initially I thought that, okay, there are wicked people in my surroundings and I have to be careful of them. But when you take these prayers literally, they might end up with a very limited meaning. But the prayers are poetry. Just like any other English poetry, you need to take it in a metaphorical sense as well. That evil person could be actually an external physical object that might harm me, but that evil person could be yourself. It could be my own destructive nature. Then you ask another question. Who shall grant protection unto my Artharas house on fire and peace of mind? Now, Iranians had a fire that they used for cooking, heating, for all these reasons. So, again, it translates into house of happiness. Now, you're getting it. The next question. Do you evoke or give me that wisdom of the religion so that I can use it in all that I do? Do I get the strength and the courage in executing my work? Bang, practical. Do you reveal clearly unto me a wise leader? Who could be the wise leader? Well, when I explained this to a kid, in the class that I was teaching in London, he was like, oh, this Jedi from Star Wars, he's my wise leader. And I was like, yeah, it's fine, because to me, my father could be a wise leader, or to other people, we all have a wise leader, but wisdom in its pure sense could be a wise leader. That's why the beauty of this prayer is that every time you ask these questions, your conscience within you, or you may call him aura mazda, or wisdom, has a way of answering that question. So you yourself tend to answer it in a very positive sense, and that's what consoles you. That's why the next line is, let my conscience come to my aid through the agent of wisdom. So, the best part of this prayer is that, actually let me ask you, do you think who is the author of this prayer? Who is asking these questions? Well, as a reciter, you are asking these questions, but whose questions are these? Exactly. As a Zoroastrian, I feel very consoled when I know that I'm asking the same practical questions Zarathustra probably asked 3,500 to 4,000 years ago. And it still helps me in all my day-to-day life. It helps me when I'm fearing. What do I fear? I can fear anything. I can fear exams in school. I can fear failure. I can fear messing up my speech today. I can fear anything. So that's the reason the Kepler has now all made sense to me now. So I did wonder, as I was reciting in English. And it was good because now it's a conversation between me and God. Because in the Gathas, the conversation is between Zarathustra and God. So why don't we recite all our prayers in English then? Because that just makes sense. That's what we did. We ended up translating all our prayers from the olden languages of Avestan, Gathic Avestan, into Neo-Iranian languages like Parsi, Pahlavi, and then even more modern languages, or the language of India at that time, Sanskrit, when we Parsis migrated to India. Why don't we do this today? Well, in my opinion, prayers have a twofold meaning. One is the actual significance and meaning which I explained, like for example for the Kepler Mazda. The second is because the prayers were written in a scientifically proven way, the acoustics of the prayer, or the vibrations of the prayer themselves are very powerful in making the environment a lot more peaceful and positive. So that's the reason sometimes you might have experienced this effect that when someone prays, like when my father prayed the funeral for my grandmother, I had this peace and calming effect that I found was quite extraordinary. Now, of course, this is a personal experience. Some might feel it, some might probably not, but the vibrations do really help you. It's just like listening to a good song on the radio, and you end up feeling a bit more positive. So being a student of science all my life, and you constantly hear me using the words logical and practical, I felt a bit discouraged when people said, religion and science don't really go hand in hand. Until I came across this man. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Absolutely. For a religion to be practical, it will have to interact logically with our physical existence. Now, don't get disheartened when you actually pick up a meaning of prayers book, and you end up not comprehending the prayer right itself. If you keep feeding your curiosity, you will quite be surprised, as I was when I came across this other prayer, the second custody prayer, the Ramazda Kodai. Now, all you do is, it's like a gist of affirmations, like, those affirmations that a psychiatrist or psychologist gives their patient to constantly tell him, stop being negative. You stay away from all these people. Now, very immediately, I can see some of you, including myself, making a list of people who could fall into these categories. That's our human tendency. But remember what I told you about translating these things and depersonifying them. The prayer says, Ki kan karafan. I don't want keeks and corrupts in my life, or people who might see but pretend not to see. People who might hear but pretend not to hear. Who could that person be? Well, it could be someone else. Or I could be the person who pretends to see but suppresses my conscience enough so that I don't see it. Sometimes I term that living life to the fullest. I think we all have made some foolish decisions in our life knowingly. So this is how you kind of translate these personified qualities into qualities that actually are harming you. Next, Dushmatta Dujikta Dujvarashta. I plan to rectify my life from Dushmatta, Dujikta and Dujvarashta. Simple enough. And finally, you make 2 loops in your kasti. Does anyone roughly know what do they mean? What do they signify? Sorry? Yeah, so the 3 loops that go around your waist, yes, that signifies good thoughts, words and deeds, or Homatakta Varashta. The 2 loops while you do Manashni, Gavashni, Punashni that you make signify the physical world and the spiritual world. Now you'll be wondering, why is that practical? Well, imagine those days where absolutely everything goes wrong in your life. You might have lost a loved one, a pet, you might be really sheerly dejected through failure, you might be having that ridiculously bad day. That's when these loops kind of make me realize that I'm on the physical world. These things are temporal and will pass away. It ends up giving me a sense of consolation that yes, this will pass. That's how practical these 2 loops ended up being for me. And finally, yes, you make knots as a symbol of commitment and resolution that I will forever stay on the path of righteousness, stormy or shame. Next, prayers strengthen your will to do what is right. It is difficult for us to say something again and again and end up doing completely the opposite. That's why we need to know the meanings of our prayers. That's why those 40 seconds that you quickly mumble and finish your kasti actually adds value to your life. I realize we don't do this too much. That's said in the Jasmine Avangi Mazda or the Zoroastrian Creed, where you're saying I'm a Zoroastrian. You ask, O Ahura Mazda, wisdom, do you come to my help when I need you? Because I'm an ardent devotee and follower of wisdom, as taught by Zarathustra. I praise Astriya Humate Mana, Hukatim Vacha, Uvarashtim Shatanim. Very simple, yet so deep. And finally, you say a praise that my religion is quarrel removing, nidasanitation, weapon lowering, self-dedicating and holy, which has and will always be the most excellent way of life. And yes, I'm not comparing religions of the world, I'm saying that these ways of life overlap. And this way of life of worshipping wisdom so that it guides you and using your conscience, the concept of asha, etc., that's the most excellent way of life. How many of us Parsis actually end up following this? Because back home in Mumbai, or even other places in the world, we end up making organization after organization, trying to fight with each other, trying to quarrel, just because our opinions differentiate from the other. Not many of us actually follow the Jasna Avangi Mazda in the true spirit of the Zoroastrian Creed. So when using the approach of inquisition and feeding your curiosity, I wish to give you another important aim, which will be my final few words of the presentation. Why? do you call yourself a Zoroastrian? Now, if you have a smartphone, well, actually, does anyone want to answer openly? Or you can answer using a smartphone. If you can log on to polev.com GM91. This is that interactive that I was talking about yesterday. I mean, I was thinking maybe there might be too much of an audience, but I think this can be much more personal if you don't want to use your smartphone. So, anyone, why do you call yourself a Zoroastrian? Or what makes you a Zoroastrian? There are no right or wrong answers over here. It's not a test. Because, like I said, each picture of religion is unique to yourself. Oops, sorry. Yeah, that's why I realized no one was responding. Yes. Bang on. That's great answer. Anyone else? Well, the reason I asked this question is because when I was discussing the concept of Zoroastrianism with people, many times, I do get the answer quite often, the good thoughts, words, and deeds, and that, yes, that's definitely the bottom line. That is your religion. But you end up getting answers like, oh, you know the Sunday Tansai that I really enjoy with Kachugar, that really is good. The eccentricity and the quirkiness of being a Parsi, that's an amazing thing as well. And I was like, hold on. You're talking about the ethnicity, a race.
The history.
The cultural identity and the history, the legacy of the Parsis. But that is why my aid to you is that when feeding your curiosity, differentiate the philosophy of Zarathustra, which is basically all encased in the Gathas, which is just 200 odd verses. That's a very small religion, it's a very small core philosophy that has been expounded on over and over again. And differentiate from the interpretation and practice of the religion that we have done over 3,500 years. The philosophy of Zarathustra is independent. It's independent of time, location, and context. I'll explain this in a bit. The religion was practical 3,500 years ago. Like, for example, the Kemna Mazda is from the Gathas. It could be said 3,500 years ago. It made sense to the people of that time, whether they were killing each other in war, capturing land that we still do today, or whether we were just educating everything. It's practical today, in 2015, and it will be practical on another habitable planet 3,000 years from now. But the way we practiced Zoroastrianism over these years was very, very different from, so that if you read a little bit about Persian history or Indo-Iranian history, you'll realize this, how we change, how our culture changes. So culture is dependent of time. Now, Achamichu ceremony, for example, which we grabbed from the people of India. Now, when I was reading the meaning of the Kemna Mazda, it was all good. It was all, in the beginning, it was like, I asked for wisdom, like humbly seeking all of this. And then all of a sudden, the tone changes. You say, Nasedevi druksha, Nasedevo chitre, Nasedevo frakarashte. As in you say, may the devil perish, may the devil's spawn perish in the north. And I was taken aback. Why north? What did north do to you? And then I realized that in the Iranian times, after doing a little bit of reading and research, the cold winds used to bring winter from the north, and the enemies used to invade from the north. There are many other reasons as well, but these are the primary reasons, and that's how a local cultural thing ended up being added to religion. Now, yesterday you might have seen in the Aldash Nyash of priests facing towards the south and praying the last two paragraphs. The south became the land of the heavens because of the opposite directionality in the northern hemisphere as well. So, in New Zealand, I find this to be opposite. Winter sets in from the opposite direction. So if I was actually the lone person praying, and if, say, this was the north, I use the Gothic teaching, use wisdom to do the right action at the right time. I wouldn't back myself if I was the only person, so that I may lose your interest in the prayer that I'm reciting, so that you can chat away or you can actually not connect with the prayer. I would rather be praying towards you. And that's a personal opinion, of course. But that's the differentiation. That's how the religion evolves. So culture keeps on being added to religion. However, this is the form of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, or good and evil, came about a little bit later in our religion. It was added a little bit later. It's a more modern philosophy. The first philosophy in the Gathas, the oldest philosophy was that Ahura Mazda created man. We existed, or through wisdom we were created, and we had a choice. We could either choose to be good or think positive, spend our menu, or we might think negative, or angra manu is a mentality. We do translate it to the spirit today, so the good spirit and the bad spirit. According to the Gathas, north is not the direction. Where do you think does the devil lie? Or where do you think worst thinking lies? Yes, in your mind. That could be the actual place. And it's again universal, practical, and logical. I can believe that, an atheist can believe that. So, context, finally. Imagine that piece of chocolate cake. If there were two women, say Thrity and Franny, both of them love chocolate cake. Thrity has it in moderation. Franny ends up idolizing chocolate cake. She constantly eats chocolate cake. Maybe she might be diabetic. She might be harming herself or someone else around her, by which her happiness decreases. What do you call that? Well, some people refer to that as sin. Yes, that's fine. Sin is what destroys me. It's what destroys my happiness. I personally do not take sin as something that will be accounted for in an afterlife, because I believe that sin is something that destroys my happiness in this life, in the way I live. And that's fine. So, you can't write this down in a religion. You can't write eating chocolate cake is bad, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this, because you're taking away the responsibility of the person's actions. You're taking away his right of free will. All of these things are mentioned in the Gathas. So hopefully you can now differentiate between your religion and your culture. And I was on Facebook, and I think many of you are aware of this famous page, the Baba Tips Facebook page. They're doing an amazing job. Hilarious Baba Tips. And I was wondering, how many slides can I find where culture influences religion and vice versa? Well, clearly I can find too many slides on how culture influences our religion, our religious ceremonies. Both Victor and Ormus, great friends of mine, doing an amazing job. I could only, however, find one slide on religion, and that's what the gentleman mentioned over there. Clearly mentioned as Baba tip number 1. Good thoughts, words, and deeds. However, this is the bottom line. But there is more. There's something that goes beyond good thoughts, words, and deeds, which we're not told. That's there in the Gathas. So, just for example, this is just a short algorithm. Because I'm a computer science student, I said, okay, how do I solve a problem? An algorithm is a step-by-step instruction of solving a problem. So if I had to decide between right or wrong, I would do these 3 steps. I would seek wisdom, I would seek the truth. I would put all the relevant facts in front of me. And finally, by the truth, by the sheer power of truth, which is not really my own, I just put everything in front of me and let my conscience decide. Automatically, I just get the right answer, because I can't. I need to give conscience its right of way. I need to let that happen. And I can use this in any decision I make. Now, generally, I chose my career of software engineering unknowingly with this thing. So I always wanted to become a pilot. I ended up becoming a software engineer because I thought, hey, relevant facts in front of me. I want a family life in 10 years' time. And although I love being a pilot, probably working or programming from the beach might sound a better idea to get paid. I ended up for software engineering. Now, this does help you in small and big decisions, and sometimes even in foolish decisions like not buying that convertible, the BMW 3 Series, which I really adore. And desisting from it for the last 2 years now. There are more godly teachings, like I said, religious freedom, you choose your religion, and that's what the prophet says. The prophet is telling you, hold on. Hear me out. Listen to these verses which will bring you much happiness, and then choose to follow it. There's a prophet who's saying, no, don't just follow for the sake of following it. Don't just take my word for it. That's what Zane Dalal said, and I really recommend that talk. It's there on YouTube. It's a really great inspirational talk which teaches you more about these concepts. Very short thing and excellent to connect with the next generation. So finally, I can actually say that. So we fear that our minority ethnic groups like the Parsis. Hold on. We fear that our minority ethnic groups like the Parsis or the Iranis might die out in the near future. And that's why the government of India started this Geo-Parsi scheme, whereby which they give fertility treatments, etc., to see to it that the Parsis end up preserving the cultural identity and the heritage. That's all fine. I'm all good with it. But this is a scheme. It has some really funny ads. That's one for the guys, and this one's for the ladies. But what I fear the most is that the religion of Zarathustra, the message of our prophet, will end up just like this gallery in the British Museum. It has already faded in the minds of some of us Parsis, but this can actually happen. It might fade away and not help humanity. What gives me confidence, however, is that each one of us sitting here can embrace it and then automatically evolve themselves using the religion as the way of life it truly is. Thank you.